Hello, I'm Ushcho and welcome to Let's H. Please scroll down and click on the Read More, visit the links in the blurb and become a patron on Patreon for more quality content. Today we have another episode of Angel, the 7th episode of Season 5, Lineage. This one is, to get you ready, not great. It's unfortunate because this is pretty much Wesley's one and only chance to actually have meaningful development in Season 5. Unfortunately, as I've said in other reviews, he simply refuses to emote completely in this season. And one of the reasons why I have such a problem with this portrayal is the fact that everybody's memories were altered regarding Connor at the end of Season 4. A lot of what happened to Wesley and a lot of why it was wrong and made the character into a less interesting character were caused by those same memories. So he shouldn't be this asshole who has absolutely no ability to express emotions. They basically turned him into the exact thing he was supposed to be kind of a parody of initially. He was never supposed to be some badass demon hunter dude, but he seems to be reading his stage directions for over a year now as "do not emote under any circumstances." In this episode, we get to see Wesley's father, Roger Wyndham Price. He's been mentioned, and some of Wes's earlier life has been implied from what he discussed in other episodes. Unfortunately, a lot of it was either throwaway remarks, things that gave the uncomfortable impression that they were trying to joke about a really abusive upbringing, or just implication. Now we actually get to see the real person, except we don't, of course, because it's a cyborg. This whole episode is about cyborgs. It starts off with an arms deal, where Wes and Fred are talking with this connection that they've got, and they're trying to sell these special super weapons to this dude, except it's broken up by cyborg ninjas. They don't really say ninjas, I don't believe, in the episode, but that's exactly what they are. They're cyborg ninjas. It's about as goofy as it sounds. They keep attacking with chains, which is definitely a ninja thing, but it's kind of a one-trick thing. There's not really enough fighting in this either. Earlier they're challenged by a single one. Later on, however, they take out numerous ones with no seeming big deal. Even Spike, who has to focus to recorporealize himself even for an instant and interact with the world, ends up taking one out, which is kind of ridiculous. Like, it's cool he's able to do that, but it's still kind of ridiculous that one punch can take out one of these assholes now. Really, all of that is secondary. The primary plot is about Wes and his father, and unfortunately, with Wes absolutely refusing to emote most of the time, it really kind of means that this is a wasted episode. It's very dull. Wes does not emote. Roy Dotrice does a great job as his father, but the writing just isn't there. He's a horrible person, there's nothing to him, we don't really feel anything except antipathy towards him, and Wes simply does not emote enough for us to buy it that he feels guilty enough when he shot a cyborg duplicate of his father. And the thing about that is, it should have been his real father. His real father should have been the one that he shot. Otherwise, the character doesn't develop and it means nothing. And I know you're sitting there thinking, oh wow, Hushi actually said they should have killed off a character. Well, yeah, they've built this up for 5 years. He was an asshole to Wes. He's basically the cause, whether directly or indirectly, for every misery in his son's life. Hell yes, if he was taking over the building, trying to suck out Angel's will to live, make him a slave, and possibly kill everyone that Wes ever cared about, yes! Shoot him! Kill him! There's no excuse not to! Unfortunately, because Alexis Denisov refuses to emote in this episode and still does that cardboard cutout kind of portrayal of the character that he's done since Season 4 began, it doesn't feel like any development of the character has actually taken place. It just feels like business as usual. And when he ends up calling his parents at the end, it's just very unfulfilling, disappointing even. It's a huge letdown because it could have had some real emotional impact. Even though this was a character who had only been built negatively up to this point, it could have had a real impact on Wes, who seems to have a hard time feeling anything anymore. But one of the problematic things about this episode is that it brings up a lot of stuff that it never adequately addresses, like, as usual, the Wolfram and Hart issue. They bring it up in every episode, but there seems to be a compulsion never to actually address it for any length of time or to any satisfactory conclusion. Angel is also a giant asshole in this episode. That seems to be his sole role, what he actually does do in this episode, which is very little. And it's pointed out by Eve that Wes can't remember the things that he did that Angel still obviously resents him for, and that it's unfair for Angel to expect him to accept punishment for the things that he doesn't remember doing, because Angel allowed people's memories to be altered because of his own selfish reasons. I do agree, it was great basically wiping Connor out. I never liked the character, I never liked what he added or subtracted from the show. It was just as well as making him not exist, and that's good. Just as well as erasing him. But you cannot, if you are going to also take away the memories, you cannot expect these people to answer for the same things that they did when they remembered actually doing them, because it's as good as they didn't do them now. I mean, that's really the biggest problem I have with Wes in Season 5, is that he plays him as if he's just this flat cardboard cutout. He might as well not even be there. He never emotes, he never expresses, he's just this one-note character. That's very unfortunate, and it's not compelling. It's like, just like Fred, the character has completely played out any story that he had. When you cannot even make an episode revolving around this character meeting up with his estranged and abusive father, and killing said father, if you can't actually make that interesting in terms of character development, or even give us any character development, that's a big problem. Fred, likewise, could actually contribute something to this episode, but she just seems to have something standing in the way at every moment. There's only one instance I can remember in this episode where she is legitimately interrupted from actually doing something that she was going to do, and that might have actually led to some more development for her, but it didn't. But anytime anything seems to be happening, to be made of anything, it's either dropped or derailed. This is just kind of another instance where Fred just shows that she doesn't have anything left. The character is just flat. Flat as Wes, but a bit more expressive. Her story has already run its course. It's especially sad because the other day I watched the Season 3 episode Fredless, and while I'm not a big fan of Season 3, it did at least try and develop her character. That was a really good episode that dealt realistically with a lot of the things that happened to Fred in the other dimension. It showed the actress's talent and ability, and it took kind of a silly premise and made it actually emotionally affecting. Fred in Season 5 tends not to do that. She's just sort of there, and yet again in this episode we have kind of a problematic thing with people not knowing what the scope of her scientism is. On the good note, Spike is, as usual, a fun addition to the episode. Eve does a great job in this episode. She questions Angel's motivations, and she also introduces the fact that maybe he's just acting like an asshole. She's rather comically left in an elevator by Spike, which is another amusing thing with Spike doing. And most everything that Spike does in this episode is humorous in some way, especially if you've been watching the previous episodes. It's good development. Most of the others don't make too terribly much of an impression in this episode. Gunn and Lorne are barely in it, even though it kind of makes sense that they would be more in it, but oh well, whatever. This is Angel Season 5 for you, and I'm not saying you should shoehorn in characters that don't really belong in the story or the action just to have them there. That might disturb the flow of the action, and it's not usually a good idea. However, there are a lot of characters in Season 5 that basically just function as glorified cameos, and that kind of sucks for the actors and kind of sucks for fans of the characters, especially when you're doing an episode with one of the least interesting characters and one of the least expressive actors. We've had Wes in this show since the beginning practically, and at this point he's not actually contributing anything to it. It would have been better if we had concentrated on someone else instead of concentrating on Wesley and still trying to harp uncomfortably on that whole "you kidnapped my son even though you thought you were doing the right thing" crap that was tired in Season 4. It was tired right after it was done in Season 3. There have been so many attempts during the series of Angel to make Wes a badass or to make him dark or serious business or something like that. It never worked. What we have is an emotionless Wes that refuses to emote and always looks like he's got that 1,000-yard stare. This is an ex-character. At this point, he has nothing to give. And that's unfortunate because the regular cast is so expansive, and yet it's a small fraction of them that are really giving anything to the story at this point, or at any given point. And when you look around at some of the dialogue, it's almost like, oh, well, I'll bet they were inspired for this future episode by that little quip. Well, I'll bet this came from that. They didn't have any idea what they were doing during this season. I am fully convinced, and if you watch it, you will feel the same way. They clearly did not have a unified vision of what this season was supposed to be. Even the other seasons problematic as they were, tended to lead towards something eventually. But Season 5 is so chaotic that it literally only gets to its last storyline, it only gets to building up its climax in the last 2 episodes. Like the episode before the last episode, that's where suddenly they come up with, oh hey, this is what's going on. That's too late. And it's because they had too much on their plate, and they took too much onto their plate. Stupidly, but we'll get to that later. Lineage is not a good episode. In fact, it's a very poor episode. If we had had anything meaningful, anything real, it might have actually been affecting, even with Wes's inability to emote, Alexis Denisov's poor performance, as it's been this one-note character all through the season. If you're going to try and resolve a dangling plot, at least do it in a way that's fulfilling, and at least do it in a way that brings it to a resolution, not the non-resolution that we had. All that we found out was that he was willing to kill something he thought was his father if it endangered his friends and seemed to be endangering a lot of things, but it didn't make us feel better for Wes. It didn't make him look better, it just made him look like a psychopath who was willing to kill everyone just for a stunt. Also, even though we were disagreeing with his father, and his father was an obvious asshole, that didn't make Wes seem more competent. It also didn't make him more likable. He used to be kind of a goofy character, but lovable, because he meant well. The episode Guys Will Be Guys, G-U-I-S-E, haha, from Season 2 was a fantastic example of Wes at his best. He was pretending that he was Angel, and even though it was a slightly light and more comical episode, it actually had a lot of fantastic elements to it, as a lot of the stuff in Season 2 did, to develop the character. And not only that, but it developed other characters too, like it developed Angel as well, it developed Cordelia as well. It was a fantastic episode because of that. Everybody actually had a lot of moments in it, and even though it was a Wesley-centric episode, it made us love the character more. That's what a focus episode should do. But this episode fails in every way it's possible to fail in it. It's just a yawner of an episode. It ends up not doing anything or having any purpose, and ultimately it doesn't develop the character, it doesn't make them more sympathetic. His father is not likable, he's an asshole. Wes is not likable at this point either because he barely exists. He's phoning it in all the time. Fred isn't even possible to like because she picks a stupid fight with him, over stupid reasons, and has stupid dialogue. It's very unfortunate, too, when people cannot act like adults because they're not being written as real adults. We never get a moment where Wes really stands up to his father in a satisfying way. It kind of happens on the rooftop at the end, but not really. We see that he's learned absolutely nothing from the experience when he dials up his parents anyway, and just gets yelled at by his father, we are to presume. Ultimately, this episode is just yet another one of the horrible wastes of time that Season 5 wants to toss at us. It's no surprise that the show was cancelled when it was, because you constantly see these wastes of time that superficially feel like some earlier episodes, but don't have the depth or the involvement to make us feel like they're worth our time. They also don't have the respect for the characters that some of the earlier episodes had either. For example, if you look at that episode, Guys Will Be Guys, and this episode, you will see a tremendous difference in not only tone, but also development, dialogue, characterization, and so much more. I've said many times, a lot of the characters by this point have changed, and not organically, not naturally. But this is a huge example of something wrong that they didn't think of, even if they lampshaded it by mentioning it in the episode itself. Why is Wes acting like this? He should logically not be acting like this, because not having the memory would have turned back his identity. But if you're gonna try and sell us on Badass Demon Hunter, at least do us the service of having him be a different person instead of the same old person that we can assume he always was around his father, even if it is a cyborg ninja. And that's it for this episode. I'll be back with another episode next time. You're welcome. Bye.